looks like pretty much everyone's here. I'll talk slowly so people can still log on and won't miss anything. Today, demonstrated success in the DOE, we are giving this webinar called Understanding Modular Assessments, grades 6 through 8 math. Next week we do the 7th, and the week after that next week we do ELA and then science. Who are we? Demonstrated Success. We have been around for a few years now, maybe 5 years. We're a consulting company. We're based in Portsmouth. We have decades, I love that. We were trying to say 100 years worth of educational experience, but we didn't quite make it. So decades of educational experience, ELA and math, data, assessments, culture and climate, PLC training. We come into schools. We've been doing tons of remote learning webinars with lots of different schools, and we will continue until we're back, and maybe even after, but definitely until we're back in school. Next. Thank you to the DOE. The DOE is sponsoring this webinar and others. And thank you, teachers, for continuing to work through all of this craziness. I know it doesn't even get any easier. Everyone will be muted. There are a few people who won't be, but everybody, all the participants will be muted. If you have questions, please ask them. Enter them in the Q&A section of your Zoom screen, and I will be monitoring them. Annie Wallace, who's also here, will be monitoring them. And we will either interrupt Heather or we'll just write in the answer if that seems appropriate. If you have anything that you want everyone to see, you can put it in the chat section. Tomorrow you will get an email that has a link to the PD certificate, or a link to a folder that has the PD certificate, a link to the video of the webinar, PowerPoint, the PowerPoint presentation, and any other documents that Heather's going to show you today. And today we are here. Heather's here. Heather's the presenter, and that's me in the middle. And then Annie Wallace is here from the Department of Ed. She can't stay through the whole thing. So if you have any questions for her, very math oriented, then ask away. And Evelyn Chester is also here, and she's from Cambium. So if you have any technical questions, we can ask away. And she will, so far she's answered every single one. So that's great. And I think the next one is Heather.
That's me. So, yep. So thank you for everybody for being here. Annie Wallace was an integral part of putting a lot of the information for this webinar together. So we thank her and the DOE for their help. So here's my gentle reminder. This is my reminder for all my the modular webinars that we've been doing, and making sure that people understand that the goal of classroom assessment is to improve student performance and not merely audit it. So these modular assessments are the way in which we are going to be able to align and figure out how to improve our actual student performance. I am going to turn off my camera because it does tend to distract me when I'm doing the presentations. So here we go. So our goals for today are to answer the following questions. Why would you use the New Hampshire SAS modular assessments? What are the options for the assessments? And how can they help you better understand your grade level standards? And how do you get to them? So we're going to go through all of that. We have a lot of really great supplemental documentation. I can't get through every single page of it, but you will have access to it. And we have a lot of screenshots of some samples of those documents. So we'll be showing that as we go. So the first thing I want to go over are the benefits and uses of the New Hampshire SAS modular assessments. So just some general information about them is they're short periodic assessments. They're about 8 to 12 questions for math. If you're an ELA teacher and you're here next week, there are a few more ELA, but for the most part for math, there's about 8 to 12 questions. The great thing about them for us math folks is that all of the kids get the same questions. So you're able to see down to the question and standard level where some gaps may be. If you were somebody who was looking at the data from the interim assessments, that was one of the hardest things, was that not everybody got the same questions. So it was a little bit more challenging to figure out where some of the gaps may be, but it's very easy to do that with the modular assessments. The questions are completely based on the Common Core. Anna and I, and Mordecai and I, have been working with these, and that is the biggest benefit of them. If you're looking for something, we obviously, most of us are using the Common Core assessments, if not all of us in some fashion. These are aligned with those. The modular assessments are also based on your standard domains. So if you're looking for something that is equations and expressions, then you're going to find a modular that matches that. So for any of the domains that you're looking at, they have modulars for them. And so it makes it a little bit easier to align them up with your current units so that you can be looking at the modulars in conjunction with what you're currently teaching. In addition, you can administer the modular assessments at any time throughout the year. There's no window that they open or close, and you can administer any modular at any time. And they can be administered at your current grade level or at the appropriate grade level for your students. If you have students that are in 6th grade and are having a really hard time accessing the curriculum, and you are somebody that's a support person, you are able to access the 5th grade modulars to see where they might need some reteaching, or to be able to kind of help solidify maybe those prerequisite skills. So how they help teachers. This is how they, yep.
Can we use the modulars while the summative window is open?
Yes. Some of the ways that we could use the modulars will change a little bit. For those of you who have not heard yet, the New Hampshire summative assessments are going to require a secure browser and in-person testing. So what's going to happen is the system will change so that you are not able to set the modulars up as an assignment, which is the way that some people really want to use these. So some of that will go away. You'll need to use a secure browser as soon as the summative window opens and that functionality in the system is changed for the summatives, but you will still be able to administer them. That summative window opens up on March 8th. So I know a lot of you will not be ready to take the summatives and might still want to use the modulars, but you'll just need the secure browser and you'll be able to administer them at that point.
Thanks.
All right, so benefits for teachers. They can help measure student achievement. They're automatically scored and the results are almost immediate and down to the question level. So it's easy. You don't have to do anything. It's scored for you. You pull the reports up and it's that simple. They can help you evaluate your program impact. If you have a program that you're using and you're wondering if it's really truly aligned with the Common Core and has the depth of knowledge that's needed for students and for your teaching, it can help you evaluate how your program's doing with that. And it can also help you understand each individual child's progress gaps or needs. For those of you who are paraprofessionals, I know we have a few of you here today, they can also help you determine, help teachers determine how to use your additional support staff or help like your paraprofessionals to be able to close any gaps that maybe might be there for some of your students. They're also provide detailed information for instructional purposes. I will tell you, as you start looking through the modulars and some of the questions, you will realize that the way the questions are asked in some instances may not be necessarily the way that you are teaching a specific skill or standard. So it will help you sort of take a look at that and see what you might be able to tweak that will make a huge difference in your students' learning. And then the last thing is they help us teachers gain a deeper understanding of standards and really the depth of knowledge needed for those students to be successful. I always say, like, being a former teacher, nobody would ever say they don't know the standards. We all know the standards. It's just as our interpretation of the standard, what it needs to be. So that's really what we're working on and trying to help out with these modular assessments. For students, there's huge benefits for students as well. It gives the students an idea of what the assessments are all about. I know in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, they have had some access, obviously, to the system. They took the summatives in 3rd grade, 4th grade, maybe not 5th grade if you're in 6th grade now. They didn't take it last year, but they've had a couple of years to take the summatives. And so we just sort of assume that they've got it and they know what the system is, and that the tools and that won't pose a problem, but that's not necessarily the case. So these will help out with that. They allow them to practice right in the system and use those tools. And they take away some of those barriers of testing and make sure that it's not the tools or the way that it's worded or any of the way that the questions are sort of presented that is the barrier. We want to take that all away. Here's an example. We have worked with a number of teachers, obviously, on these modular assessments and getting folks to use them. This is one example of a teacher that a few years ago started using the modulars, really started looking at them herself and getting an idea of where some of her teaching could be changed. So for the first couple of years, she was, looking at it and trying to use the modulars in her own way. And then when she really got underway and started getting familiar with the modulars and using them to fruition in her classroom, these are how her summative scores improved. So the modulars and using those and really digging into those will then in turn help your students do better on the summative, which is again an indication of them understanding the Common Core standards. So how these assessments can be used. They can be used as an end of unit assessment. So you can get through all of your curriculum. You can assign a modular or open up a session and have students take the modular assessment, and that can be your end of unit assessment. They can be a pre-assessment for a unit. I know that teaching is flipped on its lid right now. It's really a difficult place to be. I know I taught up all the way through the spring. This is my first year not teaching, and I talk with teachers all the time, and the struggle it is to be able to get through the content and curriculum that you really want to get through in the way that we have to do it right now, whether it be hybrid or remote or a combination of everything. Sometimes it's remote, sometimes it's in school. So pre-assessments are going to become, I feel like, a really important part of our teaching and making sure that as we start units that we know where kids are, because it might be different than what it's been in the past. In addition, you can set them up as an assignment in the portal as a formative assessment. You're working through a unit and you just want to see kind of how kids are doing right now. You could set it up that way. You could use them as a practice test before the New Hampshire SAS summative. Go through, talk to it with kids, see how they're doing. What are some of the questions that they have? What are some of the issues or the barriers that they have? And then this last one is, we have found a lot of sites that we're working with on the modulars. Teachers are really liking the using the assessment viewing application and looking at individual questions and talking through them with kids. So using them as a question of the day or an example question in your teaching, and it's doing sort of double duty. You're continuing with your curriculum. You're not changing trajectory, but you're using examples that will then become more familiar to your students that are from that New Hampshire SAS portal. So now we have some options for grades 6 through 8. The way that I've set this up is I did 6th grade first, then I did 7th grade, and then I did 8th grade. So we'll kind of move through them pretty quickly. But if there's any questions, Anne and Annie, don't hesitate. You can just chime right in. So for the math modular assessments for grade 6, here are the domains that are available. You will see that geometry and statistics and probability are together in one domain for the modulars. So just kind of keep that in mind as you are going through and trying to figure out which unit or units that these will match up with. So here are all of the math assessment topics. You can see on here that there are more than one version of a modular. So you can see expressions and equation. There's an A, a B, and a C. And then for geometry and statistics and probability, there's an A and B, and then so on and so forth, you guys can see. In addition, this is part of one of the supplemental documents that we have. It shows the modular assessment question breakdown. I know for us math folks, we want to know, are the modular assessments apples to apples? If I give one as a pre-assessment and give one as a post-assessment, is it the same type of assessment? And the answer is not 100%, no. It isn't necessarily apples to apples. It does cover similar standards, but you can see here, if you're looking at ratios and proportions, that has modular A here has 11 multiple choice and 1 open question. Modular B has 12 and 0, 12 and 0. So the number system, you can see here, this is how many multiple choice and open, and same here. So they are slightly different. Geometry, statistics, and probably this might be one of the biggest ones that shows the difference with 8 multiple choice and 4 open. This has 10 and 2. So it's just a good to know. This is what we're looking at, and for you to know how many multiple choice questions there are. This is another spreadsheet that we created. This is based on the Achieve the Core and Common Core. So Achieve the Core has major, supporting, and additional standards. So all of the green are the major, blue is supporting, and yellow is additional. And for each one of the modulars, we have put how many questions there are matched up to a specific standard so that you can see that. And then this is Annie Wallace. Her work has been amazing. What she has done, grade 6 is finished. We're working on, Annie and Annie are working on grade 7 and 8. So those are going to be available relatively soon. But she went through every single modular and every single question and created a cheat sheet for you folks. And what this involves is it has the module, it has the question number, it has the standard that it's covering, but for us we're not necessarily always thinking exact standard numbers, here's the focus area. And then this is where we're trying to help you in understanding what a common misunderstanding or area of challenge may be for that particular question or that standard. And then it has some notes about what they might need to do in the system or what the system is sort of presenting them with, so you can see the type of question it is. So if you were in teaching 6th grade and you're looking at writing expressions, then this would be a good question here. Modular A for expressions and equations. Question 3 is going to relate specifically to that sort of focus area. So this she has done for every single modular for grade 6. So that's one of the documents that you'll be getting. For 7th grade, here are your domains for your math modulars. There is, obviously we've got geometry on its own here, where in 6th grade it was together. You folks have a lot of modulars to be able to choose from. So you have 13 of them. And here is the breakdown of how many multiple choice and open questions there are. So again, kind of apples to apples, but not 100%. And then it's the same thing. Here are your standards and how many questions there are on that particular standard for a specific modular. And then I just have this sample grade 7's in progress. And Annie will probably be finishing that up in the next few days. So we'll put that in the folder. So just check back to that folder for you folks that are in 7th and 8th grade to get those Excel spreadsheets within the next couple of weeks. For 8th grade, here are your domains for your modular assessments. Here are the modular assessments that you have available to you. And then here are the number of multiple choice and open questions. You can see here, this is a really good example of, here's modular C's 10 and a multiple choice and 2 open, where modular A is 5 multiple choice and 7 open. The open questions tend to be a little bit harder, but it's funny. We always say multiple choice is easier, but we've found in a couple of instances, the questions that kids tend to get wrong the most are sometimes a multiple choice question where they just haven't read it quite through the way that they should. So they assumed that it was a specific answer and they answered really quickly, but it was not the correct answer. So multiple choice, again, sometimes easier, but not always, not always a given that they're going to get it correct. Same thing with the question breakdown. You can see the standards here and how many questions. And then again, your grade 8 is in progress, so that will be coming as soon as it's ready. Another document that Annie has put together for everybody, this is the middle school skills, standards, and competencies. This is one page of many pages that there are. This is an 8th grade page, and it tells you basically what the skill is, what the standard is, and then here is the model competency that it is going with. And then this quantile measure here, it's interesting, there's a quantile Lexile hub that's in one of, the information is in one of the supplemental documents. And it's a really cool website that will help you if you can put in a specific standard and you want to see what some of the they have resources that will help you teach a specific standard. And then they also have for that standard what the prerequisite skills are. So you can always go and look at the prerequisite skills and see some of the resources and videos that they have for teaching, in addition to what are if a student already has a skill and they need to be challenged a little bit, they have also some information on these are the things that you can do for kids who already have this particular skill. So it's called the Quantile Lexile Hub, but it is in one of the supplemental documents. All right, any questions so far before I go into grade level?
There are no questions, but I was just about to get on and tell people to ask questions.
Okay.
I'm looking for them. And if something pops into your mind, just type it into the question and answer place.
Okay, so some grade level examples. What we did here is we came up with, for each domain within each grade level, we took a peek and figured out which questions were the hardest questions or tripped kids up the most or had a standard that might have one of the biggest sort of misconceptions in teaching. So for each one of the domains, we have an example like this, where we have said, okay, here's the example. These have been modified. These aren't the exact questions within the modular assessments. We've been asked not to do screenshots of those. They're copywritten and other states use them. So these questions have been changed slightly or a lot, depending on which one they are. But these standards, the question you still get the gist of and understanding. So we have done this, and then we put the misconceptions. So for this one, for expressions and equations, the standard here, one of the misconceptions is that students have difficulties creating math equations to model given scenarios. So especially with the 2 variables, more practice is needed. So we often give students the equation and have them solve it, but we don't often give them sort of the solution and all the information and have them create an equation. And this comes up a lot within the New Hampshire SAS summative and modular assessment. So they're going to need to know how to do that. Here's an example for geometry. We chose this example because it's just hard. They have to use a grid here. The question is hard. They're looking at the volume here, but now they need to find the base. So it's just kind of flipping their thinking a little bit and asking them to dig deeper a little bit more than they might have with this particular standard before. Statistics and probability. This is the this is tricky because we have found for this type of model that we need to make sure that we are doing a lot of analysis and using this particular type of box plot, which is sometimes we find is not necessarily taught in depth in 6th grade. For the number system, here's one of the questions that we have here, and the standard that's attached to it. Operations with fractions, they're just challenging. Kids have a really hard time. And problem solving skills here, there's no sort of, we try to get away from teaching kids those sort of like easy words to look at to see if you're going to do addition, subtraction, multiplication, or division. But these definitely don't have any of those sort of clue words in there. And they have to really take a look at this and figure out, what am I trying to solve here? So that's why we chose this one. For ratios and proportions, this one seems easy enough, but it's the 0.5% rather than 5%. Again, a multiple choice question seems like it should be pretty straightforward, but kids often are not answering the correct way because they're not looking at it as 0.5%. They're looking at it as 5%. So for 7th grade, as we start getting into 7th grade for expressions and equations, as we look at this, here is, I gave 2 examples of this one because this is when we're dealing with inequalities and negative numbers, kids forget to do a lot of things that they need to do. So they need a ton of practice on this. When you're multiplying and dividing by negative values, they forget to reverse that inequality symbol when you've got the negative there. And we need to make sure these questions are very easy if we continue to have kids check their answers and teach them how to check their answers, which I know we do, but making it a have to be able to make sure that they're answering it properly. Again, multiple choice question, but still kids are getting them wrong quite a bit. Here's an example of geometry for 7th grade. You can look here, it's looking at surface area in square units. So making sure that students are really understanding the difference between surface area, and volume is key. I know we teach it differently, but just making sure that they're really understanding what they're looking for, and not sort of relying on a formula to be able to do that. They have to read the problem carefully to see what they need to be able to solve. So for this one here, for the number system, we have, again, this seems like it's pretty straightforward, but this is one of those that says select all situations that describe adding or subtracting opposites to make 0. So we teach them and they understand that sort of, number model there with the +1 plus -1 equals 0. Like they know you've got a regular one and a negative one and it's all good. They know that equals 0, but just making sure that they are able to apply that knowledge to problems that don't fit that particular scenario. And they're using words here for saying adding and subtracting opposites and not necessarily just showing the functions. So they just have a little bit more to do with this particular one, and the fact that it's a multi-answer tends to trip kids up. For ratios and proportions, this is one of the questions that we found was one that kids often had trouble with. And it's basically computations with fractions. It continues to be a problem, and they need to know, students need to know that they can convert these numbers, right, into decimal equivalents, and it may help them solve a lot of problems. So, and this particular problem here takes a lot of perseverance. It's a little bit tricky for them to understand. They need to know how many minutes it will take a car to travel 130 miles with this constant speed. I mean, it's not an easy question. So, and in that, there's no multiple choice. There's no, okay, this could be the answer and it's quick and easy. You actually have to input the answer into the open space here with that sort of number pad there. So again, here for statistics and probability, this one seems like it should be, again, pretty straightforward. We're looking at shaded fractions. They're looking at a spinner. For it says, for which one is the probability 2/3 that the spinner will not land on the shaded space? Well, they immediately look at A and they say, well, that's the only one in thirds. I'm going to choose that as an answer, and they move on. But that's not looking at D, which is an equivalent fraction, right? We can break that into thirds, and it's actually D that is the answer. So making sure that kids are really thinking through their answers and reading them carefully. And one of the things that we've also found is that students tend to think that these shaded areas need to be connected for some reason, and they don't need to be connected at all. So grade 8, looking at expressions and equations, you can see this particular question. There's a lot to do here. There's a pad at the bottom, there's an A and a B. When we're looking at find the value of X, that's not necessarily exactly it doesn't totally correspond with this particular standard, but you need to know that to be able to figure out how to create the equation for question part B of the question. So the biggest thing is that students struggle in deriving the equation for slope. It's a fill in the blank problem as well, and these tend to overwhelm students. This pad at the bottom is not necessarily, they need to know, just because there's symbols on there doesn't mean they're going to use the symbols. So sometimes there is sort of a thought, if you've got all of these symbols on there, well, I must need to use these in some way, or it kind of makes them question their thinking. So just knowing that you're not always going to use everything that's on that little pad at the bottom. For the next one, for functions, you can see this particular question here. A lot of the misunderstanding or misconception is that students don't understand that a function can be represented in different ways. So the table, graph, and an equation. Again, firm grasp of slope is the rate of change, and understanding the y-intercept. And it has multiple criteria, so students have a hard time being able to answer this type of question. So the question that goes with geometry, again, there's the standard that's attached to it, and some of the misconceptions, either with students learning or teaching, and making sure that obviously they need to know the Pythagorean theorem, we know that, but they also need to understand this particular question is looking at them to phrase it in terms of A. So it needs to be an A equals. And they might not be really well versed in understanding even what the terminology means, create an equation in terms of A, like what does that mean? So you want to make sure to go over these types of questions so that they understand what that could mean and how they could derive the correct answer from it. This here too is that they're looking at a square root over here, and the square root of something squared is that number. So they might not remember to square that again and know that, okay, this is just 28. They get kind of tripped up on that. So for the number system for grade 8, here is our example question. And obviously students just need to have a firm understanding of squares and square roots. A lot of times the estimating of square roots needs to kind of be practiced. So we had some other verbiage in here, but I guess the gist of it would be if you're looking at the square root of 8, well, you know the square root of 4 is 2 and the square root of 9 is 3. So it's somewhere in between those. So it's going to be less than 3. And when you figure out the square root of 36 over 2, you find out that that answer is 3. So the square root of 32 over 2 is inevitably going to be larger. So having kids be able to look at that and say, well, what is the square root of 8? Well, it's not a perfect square, but I know it's going to be between these. That type of thinking needs to be practiced and really used and have kids understanding that. For statistics and probability, here's our example. This particularly is one that we put this one in because two-way tables is one of those that sometimes goes by the wayside in making sure that students are practicing this type of looking at this type of data so that they know sort of how to read it and how to interpret it. So we're finding that students are less able to do the two-way tables. So make sure you're continuing to practice those. All right. So what I would like to do now is I would like to show you how to get into the assessment viewing application. I have some slides and then I'll go through it again live so that you can see how to get into where you're able to see the questions for the modulars. It is just that you're viewing the questions. This is not where kids are doing the assessment. They would do the assessment. You would set up a test session and things like that. But if you want to show questions for questions of the day or walk through questions and just discuss things with your students and have them look at them, the assessment viewing application is the way to go. So here's how you get there. You go to the portal. So New Hampshire portal, cambiummass.com. If you don't have this committed to memory or in your favorites, if you just type in literally New Hampshire SAS, NHSAS, this comes up. It's the first link, you click on it. It used to be the New Hampshire portal, aras.org, but now it's the Cambium one. This is where what shows up as soon as you put that link in or type it in. You're going to go right to test administration. Even though you're not administering an actual test, you go to test administration anytime you want to get to this 9-box page. This is where you look at your reports from your interims, or if you give a modular, you can look at the data here. This is where you go to test administration to be able to set up your tests. This is where you took your certifications to be able to get into the system and be able to set up testing sessions. This is where a lot of the resources are. A lot of people have basically gone here to you administer your New Hampshire SAS summatives and you look at the reports. But there's a lot more information in here and I'll show you a little bit more about that as we go through. So what we're going to do now though, is we're going to go into the assessment viewing application. It will bring you to a login page here. If it's been a while since you've logged in, and you forget your password, you can figure that out. You just say, forget your password. It will send a link to change your password to your email address. If you haven't logged in a while either, sometimes it will give you you need a code, it gets sent. Ann and I are going in and out of it. And so sometimes we have to log out. If we log out, next time we log in, then it will send a code to our email. Every once in a while it goes to your spam, so check your spam. But you should be able to get right in and then you choose your specific grade level that you want. And then it shows the modulars for that grade level. If you have looked at these before and been in the assessment viewing application, it might look a little bit different than what you were used to. They used to be color coded, with the ELA was like a coral color, the math was green, and the science was blue. But now they're all blue, so you just kind of have to search a little bit more for them. And you can find the specific modular that you want to open, and then it opens that modular right up. So I'm going to go live here. So I'm going to come out of here, and I want to go, I forgot to do my poll, ladies. I just realized that's what I was doing. I had a poll to figure out which grade levels everybody was, but we've moved on. So here we go. I'm on this page
Can you do
here.
it now? Do it.
We can do the poll now. Okay. Here's my poll. I'm launching it. If you could tell me what grade level you are. This will help me, actually. This is good that we're doing it right now, because then I can go through and we can kind of try to concentrate on a specific grade level if that's the case, if that's what's needed.
Kind of all over the place, I see.
We are kind of
different.
Yep. I'm glad to see that it looks like we have a few less grade 7, but I'm glad to see that all the grade levels are represented here. So great. Thank you. And we've got some administrators or other folks as well. Great. So I'm going to end.
Oop. I got it. Go ahead. On your way. Sorry.
Okay. All right. So do we have a couple of questions? I'm looking down on the bottom here. You are all set with those? Do you want me to keep moving?
I don't see questions. Did you see
Okay.
questions? I don't see any. Yeah, we're all
Okay.
set.
Sounds good. Okay. Whoops, went to the wrong one. So if we're going into test administration here, this is where we get into the assessment viewing application. So this is different, just so you know. I'm going to show you another area here. Your practice and training tests. So for those of us who haven't done the modulars, but we want to practice, there is the ability to go into the practice and training tests here and see the types of questions where you can show your students as well. So I'll show you this area as well, but we're going here, and then we're going to the assessment viewing application. So this is what you see. It asks you to log in. I log in all the time, so it's ready to go. And then you'll see the drop down for you to select your specific grade level. So if we look at 6th grade, for our 6th grade modulars, if we scroll down, you can see where all the modulars are. Just so you know, there's some ELA ones at the top, and then it moves on to the math, and then it brings you back down, and then this is your writing modulars. So your math is kind of in the middle. If you want to look at a modular, you just click on that and it opens that modular and you scroll through the questions. For 7th grade, setup very similar. Similar. Here's your questions again. ELA is at the top, your math is in the middle, and then your writing is at the bottom. 8th grade, you've got a little bit to get through, because 8th grade, you also have all the science modulars. So you kind of have to scroll through those. I know probably most of you don't teach science. I am going to give a shout out to the science modulars. Even though they're listed in 8th grade, tell your science teachers, maybe they're coming in a couple of weeks, that 6th and 7th grade they can use the 8th grade modulars to be able to use in their classroom. And can you mute for me?
Oh.
And so they can use them in 6th and 7th grade. So if you have colleagues that are science teachers and they say, well, why would I go to a modular, a science modular for the New Hampshire SAS stuff in 6th and 7th grade when we don't even have them? They don't have them in their grade level, but they are here. And these are all middle school science standards, so they can use these. So, so 8th grade, you have to kind of filter through those. The science is mostly at the top. There's a couple at the bottom. And then you have your ELA here's your math, and then here's a couple of science mixed in on the bottom here. So make sure you, take a peek at these, but you will find them sort of in the second half of the modular section here for your math ones. So I wanted to show you in a little bit different area. If you get into here and you go to this practice and training tests, I wanted to show you, I have to go into a different browser. If you are logged in and you look at the assessment viewing application and you've logged in, you won't be able to see the practice and training tests. You have to log out because it wants to bring you into as a guest user. And so if you click on where it says here, practice and training tests, I'll show you in the other one so you can just visualize what I'm talking about. I'm logged in because I'm in the assessment viewing application. Even if I close that, when I click on practice and training tests, watch, it's going to work. I don't think it will. I'll click here. And what it does is it brings me right into the modulars again, because I've logged in. But if I'm on Safari or if I've logged out, as soon as I click on the practice and training test, it brings me into this and it asks me to log in as a guest user. This is how students and families and everything can see it as well. And I can sign in as that. It doesn't ask me to sign in as, this is interesting. Let's just see what happens here. There we are. So I choose my specific grade level here, and now I can choose my math practice test. These are released items. So you'll go through, take a look, there's visual tools. This is the sound that everybody knows from the
This text is being read aloud.
So there's some questions that can be read aloud and some that aren't. And I can begin now. So I could use these as well. And this is the same way. If you opened up a modular, it looks very similar to this. You see up at the top here what question number you're on, and you can scroll through and look at specific questions. Now, again, these are released. These aren't the modular questions necessarily, but it's the same type of interface as in the modular assessments. This one has all 23 questions that have been released. This is basically saying now it's not going to read it to me anymore. And so I'm going to go, and then these are the ones that are not read. So you can kind of scroll through and see the different types of questions. They don't have the standards attached to them. They're not for a specific domain, but they can still be interesting for you to look at, the types of questions that kids might run into. We have found that the modular questions seem to be a little bit more challenging than some of these. So I would really point you in the direction of modulars, but I wanted to show you this is the same type of interface where you can go back and forth. You could project this and say, this is actually one I used as an example. The two-way graphs or information is a little tricky to recreate. So I used the release item for that, but you could project it and talk through this with your students just the same as you could through the assessment viewing application with those modular questions. So there's that. I'm going to get back to here. And so if we're looking at administering a modular, so now we're getting out of the assessment viewing application. We've looked at the modulars, we figured out which one maybe we want to give as an assessment or a progress monitoring tool, or just any type of, if you want to have students taking it and seeing how they're doing. So you can look at them as questions of the day. Again, this is not necessarily administering. You're looking from the assessment viewing application. You're presenting your screen. You can also give them to students through the assignment portion in the portal up until the summative window opens. So you can work through those questions together. So you can assign it, give the kids the test ticket or code to be able to get in. They can be on their computers as you're on yours if you're remote, and you can work through the questions together. And then it can also, as you're doing it as an assignment, you just do it right in the portal. You don't have to proctor it. Students can work independently, or you can work as a group. You can assign a modular to students to work together on. And they can be used for pre-assessment, progress monitoring, or end of unit assessments or questions of the day as an assignment. If you want to have it be a little bit more secure than an assignment, it's also done in the portal. These are proctored. You can use it as an active session or an upcoming session, just like you did with the interims. And then you're creating the session, again, right in the portal there. And the proctoring means you have to be in the session and admit students into the session. You have to start the session and all of that. So again, it's a little bit more secure and you have a little bit more of a handle on it. The assignments can be done, you can schedule them for up to 2 weeks. Kids can take 2 weeks to do it. When it's proctored, it's a little bit different. You have to be in and letting kids in and starting sessions. And then we have a webinar coming up in March. I believe it's March 2nd for how to administer these assessments. So there's a whole webinar on how to do that. So if you're going into the portal and you want to set it up as an assignment or a session, just a little quick and dirty so you don't have to wait until March 2nd, you go into test administration, you log in, and here's that maybe a familiar screen to you if you were somebody that administered the interims or if you administered the New Hampshire SAS in the past. You have your active session here. Here's your upcoming sessions, and then this is the at-home assignments. So you would go through and create it that way. Again, our webinar will get more into that. The webinar may not, we're trying to assess exactly what we're going to have in there, because this at-home assignments, again, starting on March 8th, when the summative window opens, at the very latest, this at-home assignments will most likely be turned off, but so we'll stay tuned for that. But our webinar will be the most up-to-date information that we have about that. For reporting, just wanted to show you and give you some information about if you do have the students take this as an assessment and you created the session and students finished, the results are available right away. The reports have detail down to the question and standard level. And the data can be used, obviously, to assess understanding, create groups for teaching, digging deeper into students mastery of standards. So to look at the reports, you go right into reporting. For the modular assessments, they're called benchmarks. So on the main reporting screen, you'll see that you'll probably have some interim assessments showing. If you have benchmarks, those are the modulars. So you can click on any of the benchmarks and it will give you this information. It shows you the 5 items in which students perform the best on and the 5 items in this that they performed the worst on. Now, if there's only 9 questions, it doesn't have these 2 columns. So it would just have the total items, but we love the fact that it shows you here, okay, this is what kids are doing really well on, and this is what they're not doing so well on. It shows you the same information here, but it's just nice to look, okay, here's a quick and dirty on the questions that really students did not do well on. Again, here is the information on your total. If you click on that number there that says number 1, you can click and it will show you the question. It will show you the domain that it was in, the cluster, and the standards that it was addressing. And you can also see what the correct answer was. If you look down here, you can see how students scored on the individual questions. So if I click on this 0 for this particular student, I've taken the names off, but if you click on the 0 here, you will see what that particular student answered for the question. So you can start to see, oh, this is how students are answering this particular question. Maybe a lot of them are getting it the same, putting the same answer in. So there must be something that was sort of tripping them up in their understanding, or something that students are doing that you might need to kind of reteach or just take another couple of, a little bit of class time to be able to make sure that they understand it. You can export those to Excel. It will show you the standards. This happens to just be a reading example that I have here, but we'll show you all of your math standards that are attached to that particular assessment, and then how students scored on that particular standard. So you can see, okay, for these standards, I need to look at how all the kids did, and it seems to be this one particular standard that's an issue. So where's the hang up? So there are a lot of other resources for the New Hampshire SAS. So I want to show you some of them. If you go into that 9-box page again, you go into Test Administration Resources. You choose General Information, and for teachers, these are invaluable. I wish that teachers knew about these. I've been spreading the word as much as possible during these webinars and with any sites that I work with. You can choose a specific PLD, which is a performance level descriptor. This is the example for grade 6. It tells you here, this particular standard, this is what students do to score a level 1, a level 2, a level 3, and a level 4. So we obviously want to look at this proficient. We want kids to be proficient or higher. This is what kids need to do with this standard to be able to score proficient. It goes through every single standard for your grade level. So check them out. They are really great tools to make sure that you are doing everything you can to make sure that students understand these particular skills. In addition to here, there are also some tutorials that we have. So for students and families, these practice tools. So as you get in here, you can look at all of these in the item type tutorials. There's no sound or anything. They're not fancy, but anything that has to do with something they might need to do in the system is in here. Now, again, not all of these are used at every grade level, but if you're looking at an equation response, this is how you use the keypad. Or if you're looking at a grid item, this is how you're going to use the grid and how you're able to drop information in there or move information. If you're looking at multi-select, this is what you need to do for multi-select, or if there's a table, this is how you can complete the table. So these are really great things for you to take a look at and just make sure that your students are aware of. I wanted to show you this as well, because of the way the reporting shows up within the system, and I've been throwing around things like domains and standards. So the way that the system is, this is just an example. This is math. So this is 5th grade, but if we look at operations and algebraic thinking, or numbers and operations base 10, again, not the same standards you have, but you get the idea. This here at the top is the domain. So this is when we talk about that the modulars are set up by domain. They're set up by these major areas here. Underneath there, every single one of the questions is also set up to be able to cover a certain cluster of standards and then an individual standard underneath there. So you'll see what the individual standards are. So I just wanted to show you this little cheat sheet to make sure you are understanding some of the terminology, and when you're looking at reports, what you might be seeing. Woo, all right. I haven't seen any questions pop up, so you can think about questions, put them in if you have them. I just want to get through this last little part because there's some interesting information in here as well. We have some webinars that are coming up for our data coaching. Again, next week is ELA, the week after that is science. Then we have the Administering the New Hampshire SAS assessments. So modular and we're probably going to start getting into the summative as well. And then using Excel. So those of you, I know a lot of us that are math people love Excel. So there's some looking at your assessment results in Excel, the beginner and advanced beginner, and then intermediate and advanced. So we've got some great webinars coming up. All our past webinars are on our YouTube channel. You can go back if you wanted to look at this one. It should be available as of tomorrow or the next day at the very latest. And then this is a PD program that I have been working with Anne on, and just helping people understand the New Hampshire SAS modular assessments. We've been working with individual schools and districts to help them sort of start to roll these out, figure out how to use them, and how their staff can really get more involved in using these particular assessments. It's sponsored by the Department of Education. It's free. If you need any more information, feel free to contact us. I have our information on the next slide after this. We're on social media. Follow us. We have some fun things up on our social media sites. We've got some fun winter activities that we do. We have some really great reading and information that you might find helpful. All the information about our webinars and the work that we do is up there, and just some generally interesting information is posted on there. And then here we are. So if you are interested in that program, or interested in gaining any other information, or have questions or thoughts, or would like a little bit more information and want to email us, this is how you get in touch with us, and we'd be happy to answer any questions that you have now. Or if you leave this and you say, oh wait, I have another question, or I just wanted to ask them this on my own, email us. We're here.